Hey everyone, welcome back. We've got a lot to cover today, from conflicts to even a grandmother's journey of self-discovery. So let's get right to it.
Yeah, no shortage of headlines today.
First up, we're heading over to Eastern Europe, where things are heating up between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's launched a counteroffensive, with tanks and armored vehicles in the Kursk region. It's a pretty bold move, considering Russia's been kind of gaining ground there, right?
Well, the timing's definitely interesting. Some analysts think it might be a diversion tactic,
Right.
trying to pull Russian troops from other spots. Kursk's a strategic region, right on a key supply route for Russian troops further south.
So if Ukraine can disrupt those supplies, it could, really hurt Russia's offensive.
Exactly. Big impact, potentially.
And on top of that, Ukraine says they shot down a bunch of Russian drones overnight. So the drone war is also heating up.
For sure. Drones are so essential now, right? Like for reconnaissance, targeting, even attacks. Both sides are really relying on this technology more and more. It's only going to get more intense.
Okay, switching gears now to the Middle East. Hopes for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, well, they seem to be fading. Hamas just released a video of that 19-year-old Israeli hostage, Liri Albag, you know, begging her government to make a deal for her release.
This is Hamas trying to put the pressure on, right? And during these ceasefire talks in Qatar, it adds a huge emotional element to the whole thing, obviously.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Israel's continuing its bombardment of Gaza, saying they're hitting Hamas targets. But civilians are dying in Gaza too. It's awful.
Really highlights the need for a peaceful solution fast. Despite these talks, the violence keeps escalating. And it's the civilians who are caught in the middle. Just a terrible situation.
Absolutely. All right, let's move to a story that's got animal lovers talking.
Mm.
Europe's largest marine zoo, Marineland Antibes, is shut down because of these new animal welfare laws in France. And now there's a debate about what to do with their two orcas, Wiki and Kaijo.
Right. Releasing them into the wild just isn't possible. But finding them a new home, not so easy either. They've lived their whole lives in captivity.
So they're used to humans.
Yeah, exactly. There was an idea to move them to a marine park in Japan, but it got blocked, concerns over animal welfare standards there. Now people are pushing for a sea sanctuary in Nova Scotia. Give
Yep.
them a more natural environment. But even that, logistically, it's complicated.
Okay, so on a later note, a 608-pound bluefin tuna just sold for $1.3 million at the New Year's auction in Tokyo.
It's a tradition in Japan, right? The first tuna of the year. It's this huge symbol of good luck and prosperity. And this price, second highest ever at the auction.
So the demand is still there.
Absolutely.
All right, back to some more serious news. In India, journalist Mukesh Chandrakar, known for reporting on corruption, was found dead in a septic tank.
Yeah, a really disturbing story. It raises these big questions about press freedom, especially when you're investigating corruption. Powerful people might want to silence you.
He had a YouTube channel, right, where he exposed these shady public works projects.
That's right. His death is a huge loss.
Authorities have arrested 3 people, but they're still looking for the main suspect. And in a story that, makes you think about how technology can be misused, well, the FBI says that the New Orleans attacker, the one who killed 14 people on New Year's, he was wearing Meta-Smart glasses.
And not just during the attack, but while he was scouting locations too. The weird thing is he didn't use the live stream feature.
So what was he doing? Recording it for himself.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe planning to share it later.
Yeah.
The FBI is looking into his travel too, trips to Egypt, Canada, see if there's any international connection.
It's scary to think about how wearable tech could be used like that.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder about privacy, right? Like with all this tech in our lives now. Yeah, for sure. Speaking of tech and the consequences, over in Africa, 3 Chinese nationals were just caught in the Democratic Republic of Congo with 12 gold bars and $800,000 in cash hidden in their car.
Wow, sounds like a movie.
The governor of South Kivu province, that's where it happened, he hinted that these guys might be connected to some big players in the capital. The DRC has a ton of minerals, but it's a magnet for exploitation, fuels conflict.
It's sad, Issues like corruption, they're still plaguing so many developing nations.
It is. Okay, so shifting gears to something new in the U.S., New York City just put in place a congestion charge for vehicles, going into the busiest areas.
That's a big step, right?
Huge. They're trying to ease traffic, lower pollution, get some money for public transport. Lots of other big cities are paying attention to this,
I'll bet.
Yeah, there's definitely debate, though, right? Some say it's unfair to drivers. Others think it's necessary for the city.
And President-elect Trump's already said he hates the plan. So that should be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for a story that's really inspiring women in China, there's this 60-year-old grandmother, Su Min, and she's become a kind of feminist icon.
She decided to leave an abusive marriage, right? And to do it, she went on this 4-year road trip across China. It's a big deal in a society where, women face these traditional expectations. They made it into a film, too.
So it's resonating with a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and speaking of freedom of expression, Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist Ann Telnis, well, she just hit the Washington Post, she claims they wouldn't publish her cartoon making fun of the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, and some other tech giants for, seemingly being pro-Trump.
Interesting.
Right. The Post says it was an editorial decision, that the cartoon was too similar to other stuff they were running. But Telnis thinks it's a bad sign. Like, what does it mean for creative freedom?
Yeah, I can see that.
It'll be interesting to see what happens next with that story. It does make you wonder about editorial control, right? Like, how much influence does ownership have? And speaking of conflicts over in Ukraine, a Russian state newspaper is reporting one of their freelance reporters was killed in a Ukrainian drone strike near Donetsk.
Oh, wow. That's terrible. Just shows how dangerous it is for journalists covering this war.
Absolutely. Russia's accusing Ukraine of, intentionally targeting journalists, but we haven't heard anything from Ukraine's side yet. It's tough because information is a weapon in these situations.
Yeah. And journalists are often right in the middle of it.
Exactly.
It's a sad reminder of the human cost of war.
Yeah.
And what people risk to report on it. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, she's back with a new Netflix show, With Love.
It's a pretty big change for her. She's been keeping a low profile since, stepping back from royal life in 2020. This show's all about wellness and domesticity, kind of a return to her roots as a lifestyle blogger, some people are saying.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how people react, if this is her moving on from royal life for good.
Okay, and speaking of shakeups, Austria's political scene is a mess right now.
Yeah.
Chancellor Karl Nehammer just resigned. Coalition talks fell apart.
Yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty in Austrian politics now. The far-right Freedom Party, they had this huge win in the last election, really shook things up. Now the conservatives, they have to decide. New elections or try to form a coalition with the Freedom Party.
And a coalition with the Freedom Party, I mean, that could have big consequences, right?
Yeah.
For Austria, especially on immigration, maybe even their relationship with the EU.
Definitely something to watch.
Here in the U.S., preparations are underway to say goodbye to former President Jimmy Carter. State funeral ceremonies started over the weekend in Georgia, and there's events planned all week.
It's a chance for people to reflect on his life, not just as president, but all the humanitarian work he did. Habitat for Humanity, promoting peace and democracy globally, a real advocate for human rights.
His legacy goes beyond politics.
For sure.
President Biden will be giving the eulogy at the funeral in D.C., and all the living former presidents are supposed to be there. Shows how much respect he had across the political spectrum. Meanwhile, the Biden administration approved an $8 billion arms sale to Israel. I'm sure that'll be controversial.
Yeah, it comes at a sensitive time, With the conflict in Gaza and Trump taking over soon, it definitely shows, the U.S. is committed to Israel's security, but there are concerns about, making things worse in the region. Could hurt chances for peace.
It'll be interesting to see what Trump does with this whole situation.
Yeah.
So in other news, Haiti is still struggling with gang violence, and things have gotten so bad that 150 Guatemalan soldiers have been sent in to help with the UN security mission.
It's a desperate situation there. The gangs have so much power, it's undermining the government. The international community is trying to step in, restore some order, provide aid. But the problems run deep, right?
Yeah.
Poverty, corruption, lack of opportunity.
It's a reminder that security is so important for a country to thrive.
Absolutely.
Okay, switching gears again, Hollywood's gearing up for the Golden Globes tonight.
Yeah, always a big night. We've got Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet, Cynthia Erivo, Daniel Craig, all nominated. And on the TV side, Baby Reindeer, Shogun, The Bear are all getting a lot of buzz. The Golden Globes are usually a good indicator of who's going to do well at the Oscars.
So we'll see who comes out on top. Now, this is an interesting one. There's this trend where even though Vietnam's economy is booming, Vietnamese people are the biggest group trying to get to the UK by crossing the English Channel in small boats.
Yeah, it's not just about poverty, though. It's what sociologists call relative deprivation. Even if your life's getting better, you still feel like you're falling behind. A lot of Vietnamese people, they see the UK as a place with more opportunity, higher wages, and they're willing to risk a lot to get there.
Wow, it's a reminder that economic growth doesn't always equal happiness.
It doesn't. And sometimes those push and pull factors for migration, they're more complex than we think.
Here in the U.S., Vice President Kamala Harris is kind of at a crossroads in her career after losing to Trump.
Yeah, she's got to figure out her next move. Some Democrats think she could be a good candidate for president again in 2028. Others say maybe she runs for governor of California in 2026. She's still a powerful figure in the party, so everyone's watching what she does.
Yeah, her decision will definitely impact the Democrats' future.
For sure.
In Tanzania, the government's trying to promote compressed natural gas, CNG, as a cheaper and cleaner alternative to petrol and diesel. But it's not going as smoothly as they hoped.
The problem is there aren't enough CNG filling stations, so people who converted their cars are stuck waiting in these long lines. They need to invest in the infrastructure, if they want people to adopt this new technology.
Putting the cart before the horse. Speaking of politics, there's a photo from the House Speaker vote that's giving people a look at how much influence Trump still has. It shows Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene on the phone with Susie Wiles, Trump's incoming chief of staff, right in the middle of the voting.
It definitely shows how much power Trump still holds. Even though the vote was close, his support helped Mike Johnson win. But it could also mean more division within the party, as Trump tries to push his agenda.
And finally, the nation's saying goodbye to former President Jimmy Carter this week. His state funeral started with a procession from his hometown in Georgia to Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a moment to look back on his life and what he stood for. Humility, integrity, peace, human rights. All 4 living former presidents will be at the service at the National Cathedral in D.C., which says a lot about the respect he had from both sides of the aisle.
He was a truly remarkable figure.
Yeah.
And on a different note, there's this Indian nurse. She's on death row in Yemen, just waiting to hear her fate. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, Nimisha Priya. She was convicted of murdering her former business partner. Could be executed any day now. Her only chance is if the victim's family pardons her.
Her family back in India, they're trying to raise money, to offer to the victim's family. Blood money, they call it. But it's a race against time, and the legal system there is so different.
It's a reminder of how hard it is when you're caught up in a legal battle in another country. Especially a place like Yemen, with all the conflict and everything.
Right.
It makes you think about all the innocent people caught in these situations. Hopefully there's some kind of compassion shown in this case.
Well, that's about all we have time for today. We covered a lot. Conflicts, politics, some good news, some really tough stories.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure. But it's important, to stay informed, to see what's happening in the world.
Absolutely. And there's always hope, right? Stories of people overcoming challenges, fighting for what's right. That's what keeps us going.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.